Hey there folks, Blockbuster Beach Bum here, analyzing the films you may or may not have seen on the big screen. Today I continue my X-Men retrospective with 3 more films. The previous video I discussed X-Men X2 and X-Men The Last Stand. Now I'm discussing X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men First Class, and The Wolverine. And later this week I'll have a video detailing my thoughts on the new X-Men Days of Future Past. So without further ado, let's move on to my opinions of X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now let me paint a background for when I saw this film. It's 2009, obviously 3 years after The Last Stand. And I really wasn't, all that excited about seeing X-Men Origins Wolverine. So, I just, I saw it opening weekend, like, whatever, man. And when I was younger, I liked it. Because it was stupid fun. Whatever, man. I just had fun. Then, with repeated viewings, this was god-awful. And some people, the worst movie of all time is Superman 4. Others is Batman and Robin. For me personally, it shall always be X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now let me explain to you the inception of this movie. It's obviously a prequel story about our main X-Men character, Wolverine. Now, despite his origin being kind of peppered cleverly in the first 2 X-Men films, they really felt the need to do a prequel film before they did any other serious attempt at a Wolverine film. There are several problems with this. Number 1, it retreads on a plot that takes a few minutes to explain. And a lot of it is done fairly quickly, and in fact, rushed. One such example is the opening scene where Wolverine and Sabretooth run away from home as children. It's like, there's like 3 different plot twists at once. I feel like I'm watching a X-Men movie directed by M. Night Shyamalan. I mean, what the hell is this? One of the better scenes of the movie is actually the opening title credits, which also goes too quickly because the opening title credits shows Wolverine and Sabretooth fighting in different wars across the centuries. That would have been a movie I would pay money to see, except they do it in the opening credits, which is ironic considering that none of the other X-Men films have had opening credits. I don't think the Wolverine had them either. So, I don't know why they needed them for that. But for X-Men Origins Wolverine, there are some, interesting aspects. You get to see, another bunch of mutants. However, none of these mutants turned out to be really interesting. I was excited to hear that the Blob was going to be in this movie, but the Blob was just kind of a punchline, and it was in, 2 scenes. Then you have some, guy who controls electric circuits or whatever, and then he gets killed off. And then you have Will.i.am as a mutant. Yeah, that's right, Will.i.am is in this movie. Thankfully, his character gets killed off. It's really just a lot of boring characters. Then Ryan Reynolds as, apparently a character called Deadpool. Apparently. But they just kind of completely get the character completely wrong. And it's stupid, and all it is just a dumb action climax of this character, because he's basically built to be like the mutant with as many powers as you can shove in one character as possible. He's got the adamantium, the healing capability, he's got the laser beams, and the teleportation. And his adamantium katanas are physically impossible, because the length of these things are longer than his forearm, and how would you be able to fit that? I don't know. It's really kind of lame. What else is lame about this movie is the fact that Wolverine really experiences no transformation. He was essentially the same guy before and after he lost his memories, which he does lose at the end of the movie, which is weird because the way they describe it as the procedure caused him to lose memories in the previous X-Men films. But instead, it's just someone shooting an adamantium bullet. I don't know. It's just kind of lame to me. Then you have just the special effects in this movie is crazy. And like the fighting scenes are horrible. Like there's a lot of like really sloppily looking wireworks, which would have been acceptable maybe 6 or 7 or 9 years before this movie. But this is 2009. This is a year after we got The Dark Knight and Iron Man. We expect more from a superhero film. Also, the Wolverine claws look absolutely terrible. I mean, even worse than they did in X-Men. They looked good in X-Men, but that was like, fairly primitive CGI for 2000. And then now we have this, 2009, where it's just really bad. Like, my Wolverine claws that I'm putting on right now, this thing that's like really like plastic and fake as hell, is more realistic than what they gave us in the movie. So what I'm doing right now, I'm giving you your money's worth more than what X-Men Origins Wolverine did. But there are only two redeeming qualities in this movie. Danny Huston as William Stryker. I feel, other than Brian Cox, he's the best William Stryker we've had in the franchise. But, the script is just stupid. So he's not really given all that much intelligent to do. And then, of course, Liev Schreiber as Sabretooth. I would have loved to have seen him in future, X-Men installments as Sabretooth, but I guess that won't happen. I don't know. Probably not, but I really liked him. I thought he kind of had this kind of vibe where you really just hated this guy's guts. And I thought Schreiber really portrayed that very well. What else doesn't work for me is that there's a love interest in the movie for Wolverine, and the love interest is boring as hell. Some sort of twist happens with the love interest. It's stupid. And it's just really boring. But the most ironic part about this movie is that even though it's titled X-Men Origins Wolverine, you'd expect it's a Wolverine movie. But it's not. It's more about the other mutants than it is about Wolverine. Wolverine feels more like a side character, especially like in the first half hour when you have like the team that, William Stryker assembled. So, yeah, there's like poor scripting, really bad special effects and fight scenes, some bad acting, and just an overall pointless movie. And I believe I've heard rumors that this is being taken out of the continuity, and if it is, thank God. We don't need it. This is a movie that is so bad that it caused me not to see the next film I'm discussing opening weekend. That film is X-Men First Class, released in 2011, 2 years after X-Men Origins Wolverine, breaking the sort of unwritten every 3 years rule, established with the previous X-Men films. I didn't want to see this film because I'm like, oh man, another one? They're seriously making another one after Last Stand and Origins? Are you kidding me? And then my good friend of mine tells me, Joey, you have to check this out. This is probably the best X-Men movie. I watched it, came out of it, watched it several more times on Blu-ray, and I can honestly say that this is more like the X-Men comics than any other X-Men movie that I have seen previously. It's more colorful, it's got a different style to it, the acting is fantastic, there's plot holes and issues and continuity errors to be had for sure. But it's a better movie. It's the type of movie where it's not exactly a reboot. It's what I really call a franchise refresher, where it technically takes place in the same universe as previous films in the franchise. However, it breaks certain rules in the continuity to tell us an overall better story. This story takes place during around like the Cuban Missile Crisis, Cold War type of stuff. Very James Bond-like. Which is interesting with the X-Men films because they're not really period pieces. And yet this one kind of establishes it's a period piece. So I thought that was really interesting. But what really shines about this movie are the performances by James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender as Professor X and Magneto, respectively. I mean, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart were great, but the only trouble was that sometimes you wouldn't get enough of them in the movies. Particularly Patrick Stewart as Professor X. However, in this movie, you get these two really gifted actors as these magnificent characters, and they are the central focus of the movie. Other than a cameo, Wolverine doesn't appear in this movie as the main character, or one of the main characters. So that makes this movie more interesting and dynamic to watch, because it's not just another Wolverine the X-Men type of movie. This is the beginning of the X-Men. And you get to see that. Now, there are obviously continuity things broken. First off, you have Emma Frost, who's older here than what it seems to be she was in the 80s or 70s or whatever during X-Men Origins Wolverine. And then you have the creation of Cerebro, which Professor X and Magneto apparently created Cerebro in the previous pieces of continuity, but in this movie, Beast made it all by himself. And then Beast turns blue in this early stage. And then he's, he looks normal in X-Tube. I guess that's more of an unexplained type of thing than anything else, but whatever, it still exists. And then one other thing I would really like to mention, of course, we have Kevin Bacon as Sebastian Shaw. Very different from the one from the comics or the cartoons, but man, he's definitely one of the better villains of the franchise, let me tell you. I mean, he's charming, he's evil. You really want to see this guy get his comeuppance at the end, and he does. And that's really satisfying. But he also has these powers that are just amazing. And it just makes him perfect for this type of storyline where, you have these philosophies of mutant kind. Are they going to take over the world, or are they going to coexist with humanity? And that's very much, the struggle between Charles and Eric, Professor X and Magneto in the film. The special effects can be inconsistent at times, but my favorite special effect in the entire film is when Magneto lifts the submarine towards the end of the movie. It's not only a very satisfying scene where you get to see Magneto complete something and become, stronger with his powers, but also it's just a beautiful special effect and well acted by Mr. Fassbender. And, oh yes, there is the problem at the end of the movie where you have Mystique. Now, Mystique in this universe was kind of almost like a sister to Charles, which I thought was really interesting. Maybe not exactly what happened in the comics per se, but I think it's interesting to me. And she kind of goes with Magneto because she kind of believes in his ideology more, even though Magneto kind of caused Professor X's disability. And many videos have made fun of how, cold Mystique is in that scene, kind of. So I'm gonna say, yeah, I agree with them to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, because in the movies, clever script at times, even though it does have plot holes and such, and mostly magnificent cast, X-Men First Class proves to be a very effective relaunch, not reboot, relaunch of the X-Men franchise. So now that leads us to 2013 with the release of the Wolverine. Now this summer included Iron Man 3, Man of Steel, Kick-Ass 2, and I was expecting to love all those movies more than the Wolverine. And 2 of them I do. But at the end of the day, I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by the Wolverine. I was fully expecting to hate this movie. But this time around I did see it opening day, and I was glad I did. Hugh Jackman is back as Wolverine for, the 6th time in this movie, and then for X-Men Days of Future Past will be his 7th time. He'll be breaking his own record. So, you have him, he's kind of wandering. What I really like about this film is that it takes place after the events of The Last Stand, and he's kind of dealing with the fact that he killed Jean Grey at the end of that movie, and she's kind of haunting his dreams and such, and he's kind of this bearded hobo, he's just on the road. But then he gets called to Japan because somebody he saved during World War II wants to meet up with him. And Yoshida meets up with him, it's the guy, and he's like, I want to take away your immortality, that way you can die, finally, and I can, benefit from it. Wolverine's like, no man. So then, Wolverine's healing factor, but might as well call it immortality, is taken away, for a majority of the movie. And then, he goes off and saves the day. Now, sometimes it's almost like a prince rescuing a princess type of storyline where you have Yoshida's granddaughter, I believe her name was Tao Okamoto, I believe her name is, who's going to be in Batman vs. Superman last time I checked. And she's pretty good in the movie. I think she's a solid enough presence, even though her character isn't the most fleshed out. But sometimes it can get a little cliche, and the third act itself is a bit clunky because it's just a big fight with a gigantic Silver Samurai robot, which the robot looks cool, but there's a character in the movie that should be in the Silver Samurai costume that isn't in the Silver Samurai costume. He fills a different role completely in the film. But what I really like about this film, though, is that it's a Wolverine solo movie. Unlike X-Men Origins or the other X-Men films that have to be bogged down by the other characters, this is a full-fledged Wolverine movie. The other characters are just supporting characters, and their roles are large enough where you're like, okay, I don't need that much development. Just give me Wolverine, and this movie delivers. And that is why I'm excited to hear that James Mangold is going to be involved, the director of this film, and such films as the remake of 3:10 to Yuma and Walk the Line will be involved in the next Wolverine installment. Sorry, that was a bit of a mouthful there. But I also love Hugh Jackman in this movie. He's really good and just good at portraying the tragedy of this Wolverine character in this universe, but also some of the badass Wolverine moments. Like there's one scene where he pushes this millionaire off of the building, but he lands in the pool, and the one girl is just like, didn't you think he was gonna? You knew there was a pool there, and he goes, "I didn't." And I'm like, wow, that's incredibly badass. Nice way to get around that. And again, this X-Men movie actually uses the F-bomb, which is something that people have a problem with. Personally, I don't care because the X-Men movies were never as kid-friendly as the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies like Iron Man or Thor, at least in my opinion. So, anything else to really say about the Wolverine? Well, the opening, there's an opening scene that takes place, with the explosion, and when he saves Yashida, and I think that was a beautifully executed scene, demonstrating Wolverine's power and how painful it is, and you just you see the bomb blast effect of almost like radiation and stuff. I thought that was really cool. There's the Viper villain in this movie. She's totally just stupid. I really didn't need her in this movie, and it was kind of superfluous. But I think another strength of the movie, like I said earlier, is that this is a movie that actually takes X-Men The Last Stand and makes it a better movie. Because essentially this is an epilogue to X-Men The Last Stand. And unlike the previous two movies I talked about in this video, this isn't a prequel. This is, other than Days of Future Past future scenes, this is the latest in the timeline for X-Men movies. So I thought that was really nice, and it was also nice to see Famke Janssen as Jean Grey reprising her role in this movie quite more often than I thought she would, which is really nice. So, and also check out the after credit scene, one of the best after credit scenes since maybe the first Iron Man. Anyhow, those are my thoughts on X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men First Class, and the Wolverine. Next time I shall discuss X-Men Days of Future Past later this week. It's Blockbuster Beach Bum, reviewing the films you may or may not have seen on the big screen.